In the heart of the bustling streets of Ikotun, Lagos, where the aroma of fried plantain and spicy jollof rice mingled with the honking of keiki and danfo buses, a small, modest restaurant stood quietly on a busy corner. By day, it bustled with customers, but by night, it emptied into silence, except for one girl. Her name was Sandra. Sandra had only been working at the restaurant for 3 weeks, but something about her stood out. She worked harder than anyone else, always smiling, always willing to help, even staying long after her shift had ended. Her colleagues noticed. So did the customers. But it was the restaurant owner, Mr. Ajayi, who began to wonder the most. One rainy evening, while closing the books in his small office behind the kitchen, Mr. Ajayi asked the head cashier, "Is Sandra still around?" "Yes, sir," the cashier replied. "She's still cleaning the back tables." Mr. Ajayi frowned and checked the clock. It was almost 10:30 p.m. "That girl always delays after work," he muttered. "What time does she even go home?" The cashier shrugged. "She always says she's doing final cleaning, but she stays longer than anyone, even longer than me." Mr. Ajayi said nothing, but that night, curiosity gnawed at him. The next evening, instead of going straight home after locking the restaurant's books, Mr. Ajayi decided to wait. He turned off the lights in his office but didn't leave. He waited silently in the shadows, watching the dining hall through the tiny crack in his door. Around 10:45 p.m., when all the other staff had left, Sandra quietly tiptoed back inside the restaurant. She looked around thinking the coast was clear. Then she did something that broke his heart. She moved to the leftover trays and quietly scraped together the untouched food, the bits of rice, the meat no one claimed, the pieces of fried yam. She placed them gently into a nylon bag, sat at a far corner, and began to eat in silence. There was no cutlery, no tablecloth, no light, just the soft glow of her phone screen. And when she was done eating, she laid down on one of the wooden benches, folded her arms under her head, and fell asleep, right there in the cold restaurant. Mr. Ajayi's heart sank. He waited, watched, thought. The next morning, long before anyone else arrived, he returned to the restaurant with one mission: to understand Sandra's story. 2 months earlier, a desperate Sandra had arrived at the restaurant, clutching her last hope. Dressed in faded jeans and worn-out sandals, she had come to beg for a job. She had walked into the restaurant and asked one of the workers, a server named Ngozi, to please take her to see the owner. Ngozi was hesitant. "Why do you want to see him?" "It's personal," Sandra said quietly. "Madam, you need to say why. Oga no like strangers disturbing him." Sandra looked down, her voice shaking. "Please, don't turn me down. I'll explain. Just take me to him." Ngozi crossed her arms. "Oya, talk. If it makes sense, I go try." With tears threatening to spill, Sandra confessed, "I'm looking for a job. I want to ask if he can employ me. Anything, even if he pays me less than the others." Ngozi sighed. "He's been complaining of low sales. I know sure say he need extra hands. Please, let me try. Let me speak to him myself." Reluctantly, Ngozi led her to Mr. Ajayi's small office. There, Sandra knelt, tears in her eyes, and poured out her plea. "Sir, I'm ready to work. You don't even have to pay me like the others. Just let me work." Mr. Ajayi stared at her for a long moment. "We're experiencing low sales," he said. "I really don't need another staff right now." But something in her eyes, that mix of quiet desperation and dignity, made him pause. He sighed. "Okay, you can start tomorrow, but I will not pay you like the others." Sandra smiled through her tears. "No problem, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." Back to present day. That morning, after seeing her secret, Mr. Ajayi called Sandra into his office. She walked in nervous, unsure what she had done wrong. "Sit," he said gently. She sat. "I saw you last night," he said softly. Sandra froze. He continued, "You eat the leftover food. Then you sleep on the bench. Is that where you sleep every night?" Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "I didn't want anyone to know," she whispered. "I have no home. My aunt kicked me out. I've been sleeping at the bus stop before I found this job. When I started working here, I decided to come back at night. At least here, there is shelter and food." Mr. Ajayi looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he stood up. "You are no longer just a worker here, Sandra," he said. "From today, you will get full salary, equal to everyone else. And I'll make arrangements for you to stay in the small room behind the kitchen. It's not fancy, but it has a mattress and light." Sandra's tears fell freely. "I didn't ask for this because I didn't want pity," she said. Mr. Ajayi smiled. "This is not pity. It's reward for your honesty, for your humility, and for your strength." Life in Okota never slowed down. The sounds of Okada men revving their engines, traders shouting prices, and generators humming through the night remained constant. But within the small restaurant tucked between a frozen food shop and a chemist, a quiet transformation was taking place. Sandra was no longer just the girl who came back after hours. After Mr. Ajayi gave her the small room behind the kitchen, a dusty old space that once stored broken chairs and leftover supplies, Sandra cleaned it like her life depended on it. With a borrowed broom and soap water fetched from the compound's well, she scrubbed the concrete floor, dusted every inch, and laid out the thin mattress Mr. Ajayi provided. That first night, she slept like royalty. It wasn't because the mattress was soft, it wasn't, or because the room had curtains, it didn't. It was the peace of not being watched by strangers at a bus stop, of not worrying about rain soaking her thin clothes, of not eating in hiding. The next morning, Sandra rose before everyone else and cleaned the entire restaurant, the floors, the chairs, the bathrooms, even though it wasn't her duty. When the others arrived, they were surprised. "Now who clean everywhere like this?" Ngozi asked. Sandra smiled. "I just wanted to help." Bit by bit, she began to win over even the toughest staff. She helped Ngozi balance her tray when she was overwhelmed with orders, assisted the cook with washing plates, and learned how to make simple meals just by observing. She was no longer just a waitress. She became part of the heartbeat of the place. One afternoon, about a month later, the restaurant was unusually full. Customers filled every table, some even waiting outside for space to free up. The cook was sweating profusely, the other staff scrambling. That was when disaster struck. The gas finished mid-order. The cook panicked. "Ha! Siane! I tell Oga say the gas stay low since yesterday." Sandra didn't wait to complain. She pulled off her apron, rushed out, and came back 10 minutes later with a fresh gas cylinder balanced on her head, beads of sweat lining her forehead. "Oga Sandra, how you get gas so quick?" one of the staff asked. "I had small money saved," she said. "We couldn't afford to disappoint all these customers." Mr. Ajayi, who had been at the bank when it happened, returned just in time to hear the story. He was stunned. "You used your own money?" Sandra shrugged. "It's nothing, sir. I'll survive." That evening, Mr. Ajayi quietly refunded her. But what struck him wasn't the money. It was the spirit. The restaurant began to change, and Sandra was the reason. One weekend, a woman entered the restaurant. Elegant, with a warm smile and a face that suggested wealth. She observed the place for a while before walking up to Sandra. "Are you the manager here?" she asked. Sandra laughed. "No, Ma. I'm just a staff." "Well, you carry yourself like one." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Imam Udo, the CEO of a food blog and catering brand in Lekki. She had been traveling through Ikotun and wanted to try local food for content. But what caught her attention wasn't just the jollof rice or fried snail. It was Sandra. "You're attentive, respectful, and you remember every detail," she said after being served. You smiled from beginning to end, even when the child behind me spilled his drink." Sandra nodded. "Thank you, Ma." Imam handed her a card. "If you ever want something bigger, call me. People like you are rare." That night, Sandra sat on her small mattress and stared at the card. She thought about calling, but she thought about Mr. Ajayi too, the man who gave her a chance when no one else did, the man who saw her when the world ignored her. She wasn't ready to leave, not yet. Instead, she poured all her energy into the restaurant. She started keeping small notes, recording what meals sold the most, what times had the most customers, and even how many times customers asked for food they didn't have. With time, she shared these observations with Mr. Ajayi. "Oga, see this. I noticed that customers prefer catfish pepper soup during cold evenings, but we don't always have it." Mr. Ajayi flipped through her notes. "You wrote all this?" Sandra smiled. "Yes, sir. I think it can help improve sales." And it did. Within 3 months, the restaurant saw a spike in income. Sandra's suggestions worked. Customers returned, bringing friends. The menu improved. Even online delivery apps started listing the restaurant again. The place that once struggled to sell 1 cooler of jollof rice began selling 3. One morning, Mr. Ajayi called the entire staff together. "I have an announcement," he said. The room quieted. "From today," he continued, "Sandra is no longer just a staff. She is now the floor supervisor. Anyone who has questions or complaints will go through her first." Gasps followed. Ngozi smiled wide and hugged Sandra. Mr. Ajayi turned to her and added, "And your salary is now equal. No, higher than others." Sandra burst into tears. "I didn't do all this to be promoted," she said. "I know," he replied, "but you deserve it anyway." A year later, Sandra's story made the rounds on social media after a customer wrote about her in a viral Facebook post titled "The Girl Who Stayed After Hours." It told the story of how she once ate leftover food and slept in a cold restaurant, only to become the very soul of the place. Job offers poured in. Radio stations invited her. A scholarship came from an NGO for her to study business administration at a polytechnic in Lagos. But through it all, Sandra remained rooted. She stayed at the restaurant during the day and studied at night. She still cleaned, still helped the cook, and still said thank you more times than anyone could count. From bench to blessing, Sandra's life was a testament that you don't need to be born with silver spoons or grand opportunities. Sometimes all you need is a chance and the courage to rise when it's given. The city of Ikotun had watched Sandra grow from a desperate job seeker into a beloved restaurant supervisor, and now she was fast becoming a symbol of hope. Her name began to echo in places she never dreamed of. From blog posts to radio jingles, everyone wanted to know more about the girl who stayed behind. But through all the noise, Sandra remained grounded, still wearing her apron with pride, still helping the cook, still thanking every customer like it was her first day on the job. But destiny had not finished with her yet. One rainy evening, just after closing time, Mr. Ajayi called Sandra into his office. "You know, Sandra," he said, rubbing his forehead, "I'm thinking of stepping away from the business for a while. My health hasn't been the best lately, and to be honest, I'm tired." Sandra's heart skipped. "But sir, the restaurant is growing. People love it now. You built something beautiful." "I did," he smiled weakly. "But I see something else now. You." Sandra looked up. "You remind me of myself in my early days," Mr. Ajayi said, "hungry, determined, humble. You love this place. More than I do even. I've watched you grow, Sandra. That's why I've decided to hand over the restaurant to you." She gasped. "Sir, what?" "I'll still be around. I'm not disappearing. But I want you to run it. You already do anyway." Tears welled in Sandra's eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," he smiled, and she did. The restaurant's name was changed from Ajayi Kitchen to Sandra's Table. The staff remained the same, but the energy changed. Sandra, now officially in charge, brought even more creativity. She introduced new dishes based on customer feedback. She started offering student discounts during exam season, free food for orphaned kids once a week, and even began training programs for unemployed youth. She remembered how it felt to beg for a job. She wanted no one else to feel that way again. The small room behind the kitchen? She transformed it into a sleeping space for struggling girls who had nowhere to stay, just like she once didn't. They came, some with broken hearts, some hungry, some lost. And Sandra gave them something far deeper than shelter. She gave them dignity. One day, as she was closing for the night, a teenage girl stood quietly outside the restaurant. Sandra noticed her. She looked too familiar. The thin arms, the uncertain eyes, the way she stood by the wall pretending not to need help. She walked to her gently. "Hi, what's your name?" "Amara," the girl whispered. Sandra saw right through her. She didn't ask why she was there. She didn't ask if she was hungry. She simply said, "Come inside. You can eat, and if you need a place to stay, we'll figure something out." Amara burst into tears. Sandra held her, the way no one had held her when she first arrived in Ikotun, full circle. Months passed, and Sandra's table was no longer just a restaurant. It had become a movement. People came not just for food, but for healing. They came to see the girl who had slept on benches now handing out salaries. Local NGOs partnered with her. She hosted cooking classes. Women came from all over to learn not just how to make stew, but how to survive the hard days. One fateful day, while she was checking food stock at the back, a familiar voice called her name. "Sandra?" She turned. Her jaw dropped. It was her mother. She hadn't seen her in over 2 years. They had parted on painful terms. When Sandra left home, it was because her stepfather refused to care for her after her father's death. Her mother, caught in the middle, had begged her to stay. Now standing before her, the woman looked worn out, but her eyes were filled with tears. "I heard about a girl named Sandra, who owns a restaurant and shelters girls. I didn't know it was my Sandra." Sandra couldn't speak. Her heart thudded. Her mother held her hands and whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have protected you better. I'm proud of you." Sandra hugged her, the years of pain melting between them. Sandra's table became more than food. It became family. It became forgiveness. It became a symbol that your past doesn't have to define you. Only your choices do. A year later, she opened her second branch in Egbeda. She created a small scholarship in her name for young girls who wanted to study culinary arts. She even wrote a small book titled After Hours, My Story, which sold out in weeks. And one quiet evening, long after customers had left, she sat on the same bench she used to eat leftovers on, but this time with Amara and 2 other girls, laughing, sharing suya, and telling stories. Sandra looked up at the stars and smiled. She remembered the day she knelt and begged Mr. Ajayi for a job. She remembered the tears, the hunger, the shame. But now, she was no longer the girl who stayed after hours. She was the reason others had hope after theirs had run out.